Hey, Allison Verhalen here with AV Writing Services, and I apologize. My setting is a little different today, so I wasn't sure what would show up in the background and what would not. So things are a little messy. That's okay. We're going to go ahead and do this anyway because this is live and I don't have a choice. So I am coming to you today to talk about writing for SEO versus writing for humans. This is something I struggle with a lot because Google likes one thing, humans tend to like another thing. I was in a meeting with a client once and not too long ago, and we were talking, kind of arguing good naturedly about the difference between writing for SEO and writing for actual real life humans. And what there were a bunch of us on the call. This was an agency. And someone was jokingly saying that she writes for humans, but her coworker writes for robots, i.e. Google. And there is a difference, right? You can tell when content is written by robots. I've talked about this before when I tried to use some AI writing software, and I could definitely tell that it was written by a robot, right? It was definitely not something I would ever turn into a client or expect a real person to put up on their website. So there is a fine line. It is something I struggle with all the time when I'm writing content, trying to get those keywords in there enough times that Google likes it, but not so often that it becomes repetitive, trying to get keywords in there that are actually phrases people would use in real life and not just what you type into a search bar, although voice search is changing that, and we'll talk about that. So I'm here today to talk to you about the difference between writing for SEO versus writing for real life humans. There is a difference. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about both of them, and then you can come to your own conclusions as to what you're going to do when. So first and foremost, writing for SEO, keywords obviously is a big one. It's not the only thing that impacts your SEO, your ability to show up in relevant searches, but it is key, no pun intended, right? There's a reason it's called keywords because they are so important to your ability to show up in searches. Google crawls your content, tries to figure out what it's all about. If it finds that keyword or phrase that people are putting into Google search engine, Google is going to use that to determine, oh, hey, people are searching for this and it's over here in this content. They probably go together. Now, as with real humans, Google also has a fine line between how many times it wants to see a keyword in your content. It should absolutely be in your headline. It should absolutely be in the URL of your post or page. It can be in your subheadings, but there's rules that I've seen where people say it has to be in all your subheadings. I wonder if that's not quite true anymore. Maybe that's an outdated rule, because I have seen plenty of blog posts and articles rank on the first page of Google that do not have their target keyword in any of their subheadings, much less all of them. So I tend not to pay much attention to that because I think that's kind of an outdated rule. That being said, it certainly can't hurt, again, as long as you're careful about it and you're not just stuffing it with keywords, because Google also recognizes when you are stuffing content with keywords. That used to work in the old days where you could just put your keyword onto a page as many times as you possibly could, and it would rank on the first page of Google. I doubt it converted any real people because that's not good content, but Google eventually caught on and was like, no, that's a black hat SEO tactic. We're not rewarding that. And in some cases, Google will actually punish that behavior. So do not stuff. But again, there's a fine line between getting it in there enough times that Google likes it without turning off your readers, but also not keyword stuffing. If you're keyword stuffing, you're definitely going to turn away readers. So it's a fine line. Just be aware of that. So keyword frequency is the next point that I really just covered. So don't cram it with keywords. Keyword placement was my next point, right? So definitely, like I said, headline, URL, always put it in there. But that the subheading rule is definitely flexible. The length of your content. So several years ago, Google started prioritizing longer content over shorter content. And initially, that was content that was at least 500 words long is what it took to rank on the first page of Google. A lot of people still abide by that. They still think their content needs to be at least 500 words. Honestly, that's what I do for a lot of my clients. Some of my clients I've managed to talk into letting me write longer content for them just because Google does like the longer content. The average, so people put a lot of weight onto this. So I'm gonna start by telling you, take this with a grain of salt, right? Don't take this too far, because what we do know is that the average word count for articles that rank on the first page of Google is around 1,760 words, right? People often take this to mean that all of their content has to be 1,760 words long. That is not the case. Don't think that, because that is the average word count of articles that show up on the first page of Google, right? So that means there are longer articles that rank. There are also shorter articles than that rank. So keep that in mind, right? So people ask me all the time, what is the ideal length for a blog post? Sometimes they ask me if it varies by industry, because they always think that their industry prefers shorter content. They always think this, regardless of the industry they're in. Everyone asks me this. Everyone says my people don't read long content. That's not necessarily the case, because Medium did a study a few years ago that found that content with the most engagement, that people spent the most amount of time on, was about 1,000 words long. So according to Medium, that's the sweet spot, is somewhere around 1,000 words. So keep that in mind. So it does not vary. The ideal length does not vary by the keyword. It does vary, it does not vary by industry. It does vary by keyword. So if you are doing your keyword research, you know there's a keyword with not a ton of content out there, you want to target it in your next blog post, but there is some content out there with that keyword, take a look at some of that content and see how long it is. If it's ranking on the first page of Google and it's 2,000, 3,000 words long, then yes, that's how long your blog post needs to be. If the content is ranking on the first page of Google and it's only 500, maybe 1,000 words long, go ahead and keep it a little bit shorter. The idea is always to have the ultimate guide style post, right? So if it is the longest piece of content using that keyword, and you've got all your keywords in the right places and you've got the keywords sprinkled throughout the content, chances are Google is going to want to rank that on the first page. So keep that in mind, that you want to make sure that you are covering everything there is to cover. That also helps people who are looking for something specific, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So I'm not going to cover that right now. So next up, list it out. Google loves lists. I don't know how many times you guys have searched something, and depending on what you're searching for, you'll find Google gives you an answer with the headline, and there's a whole snippet beneath that, and the snippet is just a list, right? And usually what that is just subheadings. That is whatever that piece of content has, all of those subheadings are put together in a list or a table of contents that gets shown on the first page of Google. So you can see those things without even clicking through to the website, because Google loves lists. People love lists too, right? That's why you get all of those headlines like 10 tips to, or 7 ways to do such and such, right? That gets our attention, and it gets Google's attention. So use those lists whenever you can. Make it original. Google prioritizes original content over duplicate content. So make sure your content is unique. If it's not, Google will try and figure out which content is the copycat and which content is original, and it does not always do a great job of figuring out which is which. So do your best to make sure that your content is unique. If you're hiring someone like me, I have often had clients require that I put it through Copyscape. You can just copy and paste your content into this. It's called Copyscape or Copysentry. One of them is the software and one of them is the URL, and I can never remember which is which. So put it through. It is, it's not coming up for me. So put it through that software. Copyscape.com/Copysentry is the link. So you can just put all your content in there, and it will tell you how original it is. If there's a bunch of content out there online that already has really similar content, it's gonna let you know. So I know I've had clients require me to put my content through that and then get a certain score before they'll put it on their website, because they want to make sure it's original. So you can do that same thing if you're hiring an outside writer or even an internal writer. Just make sure they're not ripping you off by just copying and pasting content, because I have had clients where that has happened with them. Not me, obviously, but other writers they've hired, and then they hired me to fix it. So optimize your meta descriptions. So this one might be outdated by the time you watch this video, but I'll put it in there just in case it is still relevant. So in the early days of Google, you got just a headline, right? Then Google started taking the text from your content and displaying that content just below the headline to give the readers an idea of what the content was about. This is why tools like Yoast always recommend putting your keyword in the introduction, in that first paragraph, because that's what Google used to do. That's why I don't pay attention to Yoast, because it uses outdated tactics. It kind of promotes keyword stuffing, which I also don't love. So that's why I don't love Yoast. So that's why Yoast does that. That's what Google used to do. Now you have the option to write your own meta tag, your own meta description. So you put this into, you can put it into Yoast if you use Yoast. If you have a WordPress website, WordPress makes it really easy. It gives you a place to put an excerpt. That excerpt is what goes under your headline when it shows up on Google. So absolutely include your keyword there. I'll talk about why a little bit later. But Google lately has decided to just take whatever it thinks is the most relevant section from your content and place it under your headline on Google's page, wherever it shows up in those searches. So it might be getting to a point. I don't think we're at that point yet, but it looks like we are starting to get to a point where writing your own meta descriptions is becoming obsolete, because Google is just picking and choosing what meta description to put underneath your headline. So keep that in mind. For now, I do want to tell you to optimize your meta description, right? Make sure that you've got all of that, the keywords in there, so that when people do find that content, it is showing up. So, but again, take this tip with a grain of salt. Link up, right? Backlinks are a great way to optimize your website for search engines. Google likes to see that you are playing nice with others. So linking to other websites from your content is a great way to get tit for tat, right? Because if they see that you're doing that for them, they'll be more likely to return the favor. It shows Google you're playing nice with others. It shows that you're an authority in your industry, because no one expects you to know everything, right? But if you can say, you know, I don't know about this, but like I was just talking about Medium, right? About how they did that study. I did not do that study. I don't have access to that data, but I can show you where the data is, because I keep up to date with these things, right? So that actually helps enhance my credibility. So use that to your advantage when you're providing links to other websites. Obviously, you always want to get links to your website, so get those as well. You can have content partnerships. You can reach out to influencers and say, hey, I just wrote this great post, thought you might be interested in it, and maybe you want to include a link in your content or your newsletter or your social media or whatever, right? Get those juicy backlinks. You can also include internal backlinks. So I do this, every post of mine ends with an internal link to one of my service pages, right? So, but I can also talk about like, hey, I talked about this other topic, right? Maybe I talk about keywords, for example, and how to do keyword research. Well, I have a whole other post on how to do keyword research. I'm not going to repeat that post here. I'll just put a link to that post, so you can go explore and find that information on your own. So you can use those internal links as well, where you are linking to your own content on your website. It does not have the same weight as an external, SEO wise, as an external backlink, but it does carry some weight. So you do want to opt to take advantage of that opportunity whenever you can. So writing for humans. So now that we know how to get in front of those humans, let's talk about how to make sure that your content is actually engaging and converting those humans, because that is a whole different ballgame, right? So first up is keywords. Again, people don't prioritize keywords as much as Google does. They're not going to look through your website looking for a bunch of keywords. But again, with the meta description and the headline, if they search for something, especially if they're looking for something specific, and they don't find your keyword anywhere in that content, or they only find part of the keyword, but it's missing an integral part of that keyword, then that is going to make them think that it's not really relevant to what they're looking for. So they're just going to keep scrolling, right? So absolutely always put that keyword, again, in your meta description, as long as Google is, you know, actually using your meta description, but definitely include it in your headline, always, always. So that is tip number one. That said, once they click through to your website, they're not going to be counting how many times that keyword shows up in your content or in all of your subheadings, right? They just, at that point, they just want to make sure that your content is providing value. But if they keep saying the same phrase over and over and over to the point where it sounds really repetitive, that can really turn them off. So don't do that, right? That's where you start to get into keyword stuffing. And that's where it can be kind of a fine line between making sure the keyword is in there enough times to make Google happy, but not so often that you're turning away the people that you really are trying to get to engage with your content and to convert into leads. So just use your best judgment, right? If you read your content and you realize that it starts to sound repetitive, especially if you take a break from your content and you come back to it and you're like, oh, this keyword is in there way too many times, right? Then you go in and delete that keyword a few times. But definitely err on the side of writing for humans rather than for Google in that case. Phrasing is another point that I want to get to about keywords. So I have researched plenty of keywords where you turn up something like business coach Toledo, right? People are obviously searching for business coaches in Toledo or around Toledo or of or to Toledo, right? So that doesn't mean they don't want to see those words in their content. You're going to type something in to a Google search bar that you would not necessarily say in conversation. So it's okay to have it in the search bar. It's not really okay to have it in your content. So this can be, again, this is where it gets tricky, writing for SEO versus writing for humans, because if you do include those small words, that can actually impact your SEO in a bad way. But if you exclude those little words in favor of your SEO, then people are like, they're going to think that you don't actually understand English or know how the English language works. And if they are native English speakers and the only language they speak is English, they're not going to want to work with you because it sounds like you don't know the English language. So they're just going to keep going. So again, there's kind of a fine line there. But again, I always err on the side of writing for humans. And this is another one that might become kind of obsolete as voice search becomes more and more of a thing, because that changes the way people are searching for information and it changes the keywords people are using. Now people are using more conversational content and phrasing and full sentences to look for information. So they are going to be including those smaller words in there. So keep that in mind. Again, that's another reason I think to include all those small words and to write your content and your keywords in full sentences, right? Because again, that is where it comes down to writing for real humans. And if you don't, people are going to be turned off by it. Length. So like I said, people do tend to engage with longer content, even if they don't realize that they are engaging with longer content. So that said, the average time spent reading a blog post is only 37 seconds. Right, which is really disappointing. So that's just they're certainly not reading 1,000 words if they're only spending 37 seconds. And again, 37 seconds is the average. There are plenty of people who are spending much more time on really good, well-written content that is engaging and knows how to keep them engaged and get them all the way through to that buyer journey. So that's what we're talking about here, right? How to make sure that your content meets all those goals. So while some people are taking the time to read everything you write, a lot of people are just skimming your content to get that nugget and click away. And instead of getting frustrated, you can write for the skimmers. You can make it easier for them to skim your content so they can find that bit of information they need and get on with their day. So subheadings are a great way. Again, Google loves subheadings, but people also love subheadings. It makes it much easier for us to skim a piece of content and go, oh, hey, that's the information that I needed. I just want to read this section right here, and then I can be on my way. The way I do this is I will include subheadings and then also a table of contents at the top so that people can read the table of contents. And if they see something in there and they spot something that they really want to focus on, that is answering the specific question they're looking for, then they can absolutely just click on it, go straight to that section, read the section, get the information they need, be on their merry way. So I make it really easy for them to skim. Keep it short is another way to make it easy for them to skim. Now, I'm not talking about keeping the whole post short. That's not what I mean here. I mean short sentences and short paragraphs. You want lots of white space in your content because that makes it really easy to read. Even people like me who love reading, if I see a block of text, that's a giant block of text, even I will tend to go, do I really have time to read all of this? Because there's so much other content I want to get to today. Right. I should probably just click through and find something shorter and be on my way. But if it's a short paragraph, you go, oh, that's short, I can read that. And then the next paragraph is short and you go, oh, that's short, I can read that. And so on and so forth. And before you know it, you've read 1,000 words and you didn't even realize it because it just went so fast. You just kept scrolling. There was all that white space, made it much less intimidating. So yes, you want your whole post to be longer, but the sentences should be shorter. The paragraph should be shorter. I tend to mix up my paragraphs. I've seen a lot of people write paragraphs that are only 1 to 2 sentences and not write anything longer. I think that tends to be boring. And I think the English and major in me still wants to see that beginning, middle, end, right? So I tend to write maybe 3 sentences, sometimes 4 sentences in my paragraphs. I don't think I ever write a 5-sentence paragraph anymore. I do try to break it up, but I don't follow that rule hard and fast because, again, I'm writing for humans who sometimes do they want a little bit shorter, but they also want some of that longer content. Again, not a giant block of text, and certainly don't start out your content with a giant block of text. Keep that for later on in the content when they're already hooked and they're already reading, so they don't even realize how long it is. Next up is talk to your reader. Use the word you a lot. Use this conversational content. People want to feel like you are talking to them, not at them. That tends to get their attention much faster than content that is written in third person or even first person. You can talk about yourself all day long. People don't really care. People, honestly, they don't. They care about them and their lives and what you can do for them and how you can make their lives better. So if you keep using that word you and you keep talking to them instead of at them, that is going to enhance that feeling that you really do know them and you know their pain point and you have a solution for it. That is going to get you that buy-in. So last but not least, images. I don't think images directly impact your SEO, but we are visual creatures. We tend to gravitate towards images. So not only can images help break up your content, they can also help your readers understand the content, especially if you're presenting a lot of data in the form of numbers and statistics. So by presenting that information in a visual format, such as a chart or a graph, it helps them understand that information better. Whenever you can try to use original images. Try not to use stock images just because they tend to look amateurish. But again, when people see those images, first of all, it breaks up your content. So again, if you've got those really long blog posts and people are kind of worn out by seeing how much text is there, if they see some images and they're really engaging images, they'll be much more likely to actually engage with your content. And then the more time they spend on your content, again, engaging with those images and then with the written content, they're going to be spending more time on your website. And Google takes that into account. So if they're not clicking back to Google takes note of that, and that can actually improve your SEO. So that is it. That is everything I have to say to you today about writing for robots / SEO versus writing for the real live humans who are actually reading your content and that you actually want to convert into leads. So if you have any more questions, you know where to find me. I have a lot more information about this and other things over at my website at AV, as in my initials, Allison Verhalen. So that is avwritingservices.com. Have a great week and happy blogging, everyone.